So a policy that big businesses are supposed to subscribe to for purposes of compliance, whatever you want to call it. So issues of enterprise development, CSI, or paper policies, and so on. I think big business can do more to rise to the occasion. I feel in my experience as a black entrepreneur, they would to be recognizing that role, get you on board, and they would only end at training and development. But where it matters most, because we start business to make money. I'll make an example of companies like Massmart who take you on a 2-year training program, but you want the business, not yes, training and development is an important aspect of business, but I think if you could be running parallel with having business. Same applies with hotel chains. They have an entrepreneurs program. They'll get you on board, they duplicate the same approach, training and development. They've got establishment throughout the country, but you won't see your product in any of their establishments. They only end with training and development. So I think a big business could arise to the occasion. And let me also make an example about retail stores, where you find wine buyers across are male, and get in the conversation with them, get in the boardroom. You are the only black female in the room. You are surrounded by white males who are executives in this company. That could be intimidating for a township girl, as I earlier introduced myself. But with struggle comes resilience and perseverance, as I said. Still, you'll be told, wow, we love your product, we love your story. Quite an innovative idea that you came up with, but for now we don't have a fit for your product in our portfolio. Wait for 6 months. You wait forever. You perseverance keeps you going. You go back and they'll tell you, oh, black brands. I'm quoting the team. Black brands do not sell. The name is indigenous for a wine brand. It won't sell. So give me a chance. Give me 6 months and see. And let's do a brand positioning together. Let's work on the brand positioning strategy together and see if this wine won't sell. Never. So there are those I feel deliberate, obstacles, that prevents us from income generation, from wealth creation, from legacy creation for the next generation. Thanks.
See that there's people who joined us online. Oh, there's people who joined us online. I didn't realize. Terrible facility. Are there any questions? Were they posting questions online earlier? No. Oh, other panelists. Okay. Missy. Oh, I've got Colin Coleman. Welcome. And Darren, welcome. Is the Ntabi saying, are you there? Yes, you are there. Oh my word, all my panelists are there. Okay, so I'll go and then so I'll start with you, Ntabi Seng, if you can give us your input, please.
Sorry, can I just interject, Tuli? This is Isabel Fry. I was the resource person. Do you want to just go straight to the panelists at this stage?
Can you hear us?
I think they've been muted.
Oh, they've been muted.
Okay. Tabaseng, can I just run through my slides quickly?
Yeah,
Okay, great. So we're assuming that they
that
can
they
hear
can
us.
hear you.
This is a great act of faith.
Okay, they can. Yeah.
Thumbs up. They can hear us. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. So good afternoon, everybody. And this is an incredible honor to be invited just to give a very brief resource referencing to an essential discussion in the Social Justice and Summit. I sat in on the conference yesterday, and so was able to benefit from a lot of the discussions that were happening there. But just moving on, we were asked to think a lot about what restitution means in terms of our topic. And we know that the Constitution of South Africa guarantees access to the fundamental rights to equality before the law, human dignity, and the right to life. But these are daily denied for a variety of reasons, including legacy inequality, reasons of dispossession, the global inequality drivers, dominant orthodox neoliberal ideology of market distribution, and limited state regulation. In the next couple of minutes, what I'm going to do is put out the extent of the dispossession, but also the fact that we do not need to be asking for handouts. What we need to be asking in terms of social justice is a major refactoring of the macroeconomic framework, because asking for a small amount is not going to be restitutive. It's just going to enable people to continue to do business as usual. So the shocking facts about poverty, inequality, and unemployment trends in South Africa: more than half of all South Africans live below the upper bound poverty line, which has just been upgraded to 1,417 Rand a month. So more than half of everyone in this country lives on under 1,417 Rand a month. And shockingly, again, 25%, a quarter of all South Africans live below the survivalist food poverty line of 663 Rand. And that is the amount that the World Health Organization has said is necessary for a person to survive on. So more than a quarter of all South Africans live below the survivalist poverty line. In terms of income and inequality, South Africa is the most unequal country in the world, ranking first amongst 164 countries. The top 10% earn 66.5% of wealth and earn 85.7%. The top 1% earn 22% of the income. This is a dysfunctional society. And if you just look briefly at the slide that shows us the income deciles, you can see that the richest 10%, the average income of 24,600 per month, and the massive drop down to the 9th income decile of 8.9 and then 4.9 going down. So there's basically a plateau until you reach sort of 7.5 to 8. But that is an unbridgeable gap between the 9th and the 10th income decile, and that's the unemployment. Very briefly, the unemployment figures are a tragedy. In the last quarter reported, there were 12.3 million unemployed people, and that's 44% of the labor market. And these are the scary facts that continue to be reproduced. 72% of the youth, 15 to 24, are unemployed. 48% of Black Africans are unemployed. 51% of Black African females. 52% of people in the Eastern Cape are unemployed. 50% in KZN. 50% in Northwest. In the Eastern Cape, only 28.3% of the working age population was employed. And this leads us to a situation basically of massive inequality when it comes to income. So we know that for Black African people, the employment rate was 33%. For white people, it's 63%. The average absorption rate for upper middle income countries was 60% compared to ours, which is just completely dysfunctional. So the other important aspect, of course, is women. So the absorption rate for women in the same period was 32.4%. The second last bullet point, and this is a critical aspect, this is a permanent structural feature. 79% of the unemployed are in long-term unemployment. That is a global signifier that says if people are unemployed for more than a year, the likelihood of them getting back into the labor market is incredibly low. We need to have major interventions, and if we don't, a recent SPI paper estimates that by 2030 there'll be 17 million unemployed people, and that will be an increased unemployment rate to 51%. Now, this is crucial because we need to recognize that grants are not a stopgap, and also grants are not something we can wish away. In many of these provinces, you can see the red line is where grants are, basically the blue line is income per province or national, which comes from salaries, and the red line is from grants. So in the Eastern Cape, in the Free State, as well as Mpumalanga and Limpopo, the grants are the dominant source of incomes into households. 59% of South Africans have salaries as the primary source, 51% have income grants. And why is it that this is not something which we are getting greatly recognized? So the drivers of poverty and inequality stack up against redistribution, so historic and continued dispossession. And one of the things, and this is where I'm going to be leaving my argument, which is that the Constitution makes provision for state intervention using available resources according to the International Covenant, maximum available resources. Every time as social justice activists we go up against and try to argue for more of the resources, we get told that the macroeconomic framework prevents this. And that is what we need to be looking at. We constantly are told that the narrative is austerity budgeting. There are no available resources. However, we've already had a number of lost decades with no GDP growth on the orthodox macroeconomic policies that have been employed. We are on a dangerous economic trajectory of heading towards a second lost decade, which will result in repeated cycles of political and social instability. The state takes a residualist approach to social policies. It believes that the family is the primary source of provision. The state is only there when the family and the market fails. But those failures continue to be reproduced, and it's not because people are lazy, as we can see, it's because of the nature of the economy. So in terms of, and just looking at the way that state policies are crafted based on this residualist approach, if you look at the social relief of distress, the 350 grant, because of the way that the state sees it, instead of it being a springboard to people being able to generate further income, it is removed from you if you start generating income. So the state, again, sees poverty relief as being the primary function of grants, and that has to change because we need to see them as the introductory springboard. Through this, we need to look at shifting the macroeconomic policy and the targets from targeting debt to targeting growth, from targeting inflation to targeting employment targeting. Because if you target debt and inflation, you're taking money out of the system and you're not allowing things to be distributed. So my last two slides are basically saying what we need to do is, with the shift in macroeconomic policies, government then would spend 3% of GDP in order to achieve that. And this means essentially that we need a two-stage stimulus. The first stage would be the introduction of a basic income grant, which gives the cash transformation and brings people to a first dignity floor, which would create GDP growth of between 4.3 and 5.6%. And then the second stimulus, which we need to, is an employment transformation stimulus. With those two within a broader framework, that's the kind of redistributive and restitutional policies we need, not these handouts that come through the social grants system. And that is the framing of the situation where we are today. Thank you.
Yeah, we can't hear.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that input. Colin, I'll hand over to you. Are you ready for your comment? Thank you.
I am indeed. How long do I have just to guide me, please?
You have 5 minutes, Colin. You can stretch
All right.
it to 7. Yes.
Okay. Well, time me out by all means. I'm sure you've had 2 long days, and congratulations to Prof. Madonsela and Stellenbosch on the event. I think we were guided to ask the question of what is the source of restitution in South Africa, and where are we today, and what should we be doing? So it sort of reminded me that the source of restitution in South Africa I've always thought is colonialism of a special type, which led to a particular form of apartheid capitalism, which has led to a particular form of democracy in the post-democracy period, which has brought us to a position now where we have 4 structural drivers in our political economy. The first is structural economic exclusion and inequality, with 12 million unemployed South Africans and 13.5 million not economically active, and only 14.5 million South Africans working. Secondly, an alarming rise in lawlessness, gangsterism that is merging with state capture, corruption, and patronage. Thirdly, a systemic mismanagement of public institutions and services, in particular transport, energy, police, army, schools, hospitals. And then fourthly, a structural decade a structural long decade of low economic growth. That is something of an economic growth trap, below population growth and falling GDP. And this brings us to a point right now where there's something deeply disturbing that is happening in South Africa that I want to underscore, which is the merging of criminal and political networks to crowd out legitimate legal business activities. So more and more, the private sector is attracting something of a swear word, and we need to differentiate between business being done for corrupt and illegal purposes, business being done by entities that are set up as proper commercial enterprises that go in a wrong direction, for which they need to be prosecuted, like Bain and McKinsey examples, and then proper legitimate business interests that have conducted themselves according to the law and contributed to South Africa. And that private sector is getting increasingly crowded out by this merging of criminal and political networks. We've seen it in the taxi associations. We see it in criminal mining, Zama mining. We see it in the tax on transport industry, the stripping of rail and other infrastructure, the attacks on our backbone infrastructure like Eskom and Transnet, and so on. So we don't have the time to go into it, but merely to say we have a common enemy now in South Africa, which is lawlessness and joblessness, and we need to unite around the Constitution. Now, what I do want to say with my few minutes left is that we cannot, as South Africans, either in the business community or in civil society, keep on doing the same things over and over and expect a different result. We need all of us to ask, what can we do differently? I think that business needs to ask what new economic pathways are available for us, independent of government, to prosecute, and where necessary, partner with government and civil society to prosecute, and start to think about doing business in South Africa in a way that traps this exclusion, or that breaks this exclusion trap, where you have the majority of people excluded from the economy, and therefore either being encouraged, manipulated, or forced to commit illegal acts in order to get economic gain, whether it's through political networks or through criminal networks. And so the more that business includes these people in new economic pathways, the better. What are these? Getting our production and our growth of the economy through continuous production, continuous mining, continuous work, a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week economy is something we should be thinking about. We should be thinking inside companies about a different contract that possibly should replace what we know today as empowerment, but including employee nominees on boards of companies, some form of stakeholder capitalism, profit sharing, training, internships, and aligning risks and rewards via these mechanisms, such that when the economic cycles go up, not just the executives, but everyone in the businesses, including all employees, benefit, not trading off salaries, but in addition to salaries, getting profit shares in companies through employee share ownership schemes. So I think there's a kind of a new contract needed in business. We need to target a much higher growth rate in South Africa. We need to get our industrialization architecture, the effective performance of our state to improve. We need, through the mechanisms I've talked about, to get our exports, particularly mining and agriculture, to improve. This is one of the most important things happening in the world today. Higher commodity prices in response to climate change, restructuring of the major economies, including the United States, China, and the EU. And this will drive commodity prices higher for longer on a long-range basis. That doesn't mean that commodity prices haven't come off. It just means that commodity prices have come off from a very high base relative to historic mean, and we need to benefit from this historic trending commodity prices. And if you think about it in rand terms, even though dollar commodity prices have come off, the rand commodity prices have remained elevated. And we'll see that in the medium-term budget statement on October 26th, when we'll have surplus revenues reported by the National Treasury. And we need to do a bunch of other things like cutting red tape to small businesses, stimulating the economy. I think that a 600 Rand unemployment relief grant for the 10.5 million South Africans getting the SRD would go a long way towards stimulating the bottom end, but also helping with the restitution process and helping lifting people. And then a final idea I'm going to share with you is that I think the 2.5 million micro enterprises are one of the source feeders for jobs and for income for the poor. And we should be thinking about injecting significant capital from the fiscus into those micro grants, into those micro enterprises on a once-off basis a year. Can you imagine if we gave 5,000 Rand a micro enterprise across 2.5 million enterprises to those entities, what an incredible impact it'll have on jobs and stimulating economic activity. And that's only going to cost us like 15 billion Rand in the fiscus. The combination of a 600 Rand a month unemployment relief grant and that would cost about 100 billion Rand. 100 billion Rand sounds a lot, but relative to a 2.1 trillion Rand budget, I think can be funded by increasing debt to GDP by something in the order of 1.5%, which off the current commodity surplus economy is not concerning to me, and I think can be easily funded and would help get growth going in South Africa. So in conclusion, fixing Eskom, ports, rails, and doing a bunch of things to get our economy to change its behavior and for business to do things differently in the way that I've highlighted very briefly, are the beginnings of getting things to move in a different direction. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. You've touched on a number of issues. So I'll hand over to Darren to be the next. Is it Darren? Darren Kemper?
Yes, it's Darren.
Yes.
Okay, let me just get my screen share going here.
Okay, I'll stop sharing and Darren can go. I'm just running out of time, but it's okay.
Okay, let me just try and share mine. Doesn't seem like it's allowing me to share. Is there anybody on the technical side that knows what's going on here? Ndabi Singh, do you want to go first while I figure this out?
Yeah, let me go. I hope you could see my screen that time.
Yeah, we could.
Okay, thanks. Oh, now I've lost it.
Are we winning?
No, I can't find my screen. My presentation.
Can we please help?
Okay, you know what? It's fine. I'll just do my presentation without the PowerPoint up there. So then I can just get started. Okay, so let me get into it. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I'll just get through all of this without the visuals. So I'm going to be speaking on a topic called the critical mass of collectivism. And I know it seems like a strange topic to be bringing up under wealth, income, and economic justice, but we need to remember that a capitalist system underpins the ideology of individualism. And so there are two functions to colonialism. The first is resource driven, which is to extract value from labor, land, and natural resources. And the second is administration. And the reason for this is to make things easy to interact with the colonizer. This involves the stripping of language, the stripping of culture and customs, and the introduction of a colonial financial system, which is what we are sitting with now, a system that we did not agree to, not consent to, but the system that idolizes individualism. And so essentially, what does this result in? It results in, like Isabel said, the top 10% sitting with 86% of the wealth. I like to call them the hard workers, because this top 10% work so hard that they have twice the annual GDP. They own 99.8% of bonds and stocks. They own 64% of pension assets and 60% of housing wealth. So the idea that this 10% has worked hard for their money is completely nonsensical. Let me read you an extract. It says, our series shows no decreasing of wealth inequality since apartheid. If anything, we find that inequality has remained broadly stable and has slightly increased in the top wealth groups. So what this tells us is in the past 3 decades, not only has this group had this level of wealth, but they've increased it. And so the idea that wealth distribution is something that has been happening is completely false, because it's not been happening. There have been attempts at equality in the form of Black economic empowerment, corporate social responsibility, corporate social investments. The problem with these initiatives is that they still underpin a individualist ideology, because people only agree to this if it can still increase the owner's wealth, if it can still show room for growth, if there happens to be a beneficial impact for the social or economic environment, then that's a bonus. But businesses' priority is still to make profit. And the very fact that we teach this in business school speaks to the very capitalist and individualist ideology that we hold, the idea that business is there to make profit and not distribute goods and services. And so redistributing wealth will never be an option unless there is a cultural shift. Any system that we implement can be abused. Any system can be used for the benefit of a small group of people. And so unless we change from that individualist culture to collectivism, nothing is going to change. And so what we need to do is we need to look at solutions that change culture. We need to look at solutions that prioritize people on the planet. We need to look beyond just administrative attempts, because administrative attempts try to get money from people who have gotten them through ill-gotten gains, who have managed to retain them and grow them over the past 30 years. And it tries to get them to redistribute this money, and it hasn't been happening. And fourth, our solutions need to center collectivism, not just the growth of more money, because that's just another play on words that sounds exactly like trickle-down economics. The pie is big enough for everyone, but we need to be willing to share it equally. And currently, in a capitalist, individualist society, nobody wants to share. And just to close off, what does collectivism look like in practice? We can look at measures like a wealth tax, which I like to call a mercy. We can look at regulating the price of essential goods and services, which is essentially extortion. Because the question is, at what price will people stop buying food, clothing, housing, and healthcare? And the answer is they won't, because people need these goods and services to provide. So businesses are free to extort the most vulnerable in society to the point of poverty and beyond that, because they can, because it's seen as good business practice, because it's seen as what the private sector is allowed to do. And so this level of extortion needs to be completely removed from our society, because it is an extension of a colonialist ideology, that of capitalism and that of individualism. What we also need to look at is mandating a livable wage, because if we are willing to take 40 hours from somebody for a week, but they can't pay to meet their basic needs, then this is essentially slavery, and again, a perpetuation of colonialism. And the last thing we need to look at is limiting for-profit home ownership, because at some point we are just hoarding housing while other people remain homeless. If we don't do anything about this, we are going to be on track to what's happening in the US, where they have for every one homeless person, there are 25 empty homes. We're seeing something similar to this on the West Coast, where a lot of money has been invested into property, and they have a 25% vacancy rate. So what we need is education that is pro-collectivism. We need to invest in less profitable businesses who purely focus on distributing goods and services to those who need them most, not necessarily businesses that are the most profitable. Because what we've done is we've idolized businesses who make profits over businesses who genuinely do good for our communities, and more capitalism begets capitalism and perpetuation of this individualist society. We have to reach a point where collectivism is the majority. We have to shift our resources and the ownership of those resources to the indigenous. Right now, the most important thing in society is not labor or the people who provide them. The most important thing in society is money. And so we need to move back to a system where people are the most valued resource, not the capital that they contribute. I want to close off with a saying that my mentor said to me repeatedly, and something that stuck with me for a very long time. He said, if the poor don't eat, the rich won't sleep. And so we see this in how people protest, we see this in how people riot, and we see people willing to give up their freedom, willing to spend time in prison, willing to do whatever they need to do because they have nothing to lose. We need to give people something to lose and beyond that. If we are going to start the conversation about restitution, we need to talk about removing this colonial system that idolizes capitalism and individualism and can say that we have such a thing as a successful business that can report profits while its bottom level employees can't even afford their basic needs. We are not at our core an individualist culture. We are a collectivist culture, and we need to get back to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those comments. So what your mentor said is what we had earlier on, which stuck in my mind, that the inequality affects the joy to enjoy what we have. So no one can enjoy what we have at the current moment. So that's exactly what your mentor told. Thank you for those comments.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so we have our last presenter. Yes.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. I will try to be quick and I'd just like to greet everyone to say good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And I would also like to thank the organizers, especially Professor Madonsela, for the invitation. It's quite an honor to be part of this event. My name is Nthabiseng Mohlakwana, and I am a senior researcher at the Center for Sustainability Transitions at Stellenbosch University. My talk today is just a brief presentation on the just energy transition and the value of decent work in South Africa. So as per the outline, I'd look at the South African employment and the jobs context, which I think it has been touched on, so I will just quickly go over it, a background on the South African energy transition, and also ask the question, what is a just transition and how does it look like for South Africa, and what it means actually for the South African jobs, and then conclude my talk. We have seen these figures, like that unemployment being at 33.9% at the second quarter of this year. And of course, our youth unemployment rate reaching around 64%, which is, of course, is a crisis situation, as the ripple effects of such high unemployment rates lead to deepening levels of poverty. We also know that at least 50% of the population.
Sorry, Nthabiseng, is your
Yes.
slide meant to be moving?
Yeah, it is.
So it's not, it's still stuck on your landing page?
Okay. Can you see that now? No? Can you see the outline slide?
Oh, now we can. Thank you.
Okay. And this one, the next one, titled South African Employment and Jobs Context.
Can. Thank you.
Okay. So just to carry on that, we've heard that we at least, in fact, above 50% of the population is living below the poverty line. That's about 30 million people. That's a huge crisis for the country. And on top of this, South Africa is the most unequal country in the world with regards to income distribution, as it has been outlined also or said by the previous speakers. I'll just quickly also go through the background on the South African energy production and say that coal has contributed to the South African economy for more than a century in the manufacturing industry and the electricity sector. In the Mpumalanga province, we see the production of coal, which is up to 80%. And with regards to the electricity sector, one just has to think of Eskom, which has been producing electricity using coal for more than 120 years. Whereby 86% of our electricity is produced from coal-fired power stations. We also have the likes of Sasol, which from the 1950s has been producing synthetic fuels such as oil from coal and supplies at least about 28 to 30% of the country's fuel needs. So as great as these technologies and processes may seem to be, or as they are, they also contribute greatly to carbon dioxide emissions that are currently produced in the country. We are currently the 14th largest emitter of greenhouse gases, and that is due to our reliance on coal. So given our country's triple challenge of unemployment, poverty, and inequality, we know that the most vulnerable when we are facing economic and climate crisis are the poor. It's therefore imperative for us to lower our CO2 emissions to mitigate climate change impacts, especially for the vulnerable communities that suffer longer effects of climate change impacts, such as droughts, the floods, heat waves, and more. Just to give an overview of the transition so far in the country, what has happened in the past years, taken maybe past 10, 11 years. So starting with the Renewable Energy Independent Power Producers Program, which started in 2011 and had 4 successful bid windows, which produced about 6,422 megawatts of renewable energy and made some of that available directly into the grid. That's also for energy security. We've also had the Integrated Resource Plan, which is a publication by the Department of Minerals and Resources, Minerals and Energy. So it's a document that looks at the Electricity Infrastructure Development Plan, which ensures energy security and models, until 2030 was what the plan for the country should be with regards to energy, as well as the roadmap for Eskom, which was published by the Department of Public Enterprises, just to guide Eskom as to, what the future projection should be in order for us to reach that decarbonized economy, as well as the Eskom JET roadmap, which was directly produced by Eskom, and in the way that they have planned their way forward in the energy transition plan. Last year, there was the big event. We're now preparing for the COP27, but just to talk briefly about the COP26 and the importance of it for South Africa was that declaration of contributions to South Africa towards achieving a just energy transition. We saw $8.5 billion US dollars being, declared to South Africa by the USA, France, Germany, the UK, and the EU. Immediately after that, there was the Presidential Climate Change Commission, which has been hard at work with developing the Just Transition Framework, and which has been adopted by Cabinet in 2022, this year. What does this energy transition mean for South African jobs? So the current value chain, coal value chain, direct employment stands at about 150,000 people that are employed in the coal value chain. Here we're talking about jobs whereby some employees receive benefits such as retirement funds, unemployment funds, which are relatively higher in income than other sectors. But of course, this also depends on whether one is a contractor or a permanent staff member, as conditions of employment differ. And information on the coal value chain work shows that pay is substantially higher compared to other industries at the same level of skill. It also boasts high union membership. Here we can think of like National Union of Mine Workers, which has members that work in mining, construction, and energy. And with the transition to a low carbon economy, it also means that there will be a reduction in coal use for production and manufacturing purposes. And that will definitely lead to loss of jobs, the coal value chain, not only in the mines. So what a transition also means, it means realizing potential for the renewable energy industry, local manufacturing of renewable energy components, such as that for wind and solar technologies, instead of importing them from other countries. It also means renewable energy technologies could be accessible and to some extent affordable, especially for those experiencing energy poverty. I know we don't have a lot of time, but I just wanted to show, what the PCC, the Presidential Climate Commission, has done with regards to the transition itself, because it touches on the issues that we're talking about today. So with reference to the PCC, which is an independent multi-stakeholder body established by President Ramaphosa to oversee and facilitate a just and equitable transition towards a low emissions and climate resilient economy. And this framework is based on 5 pillars, as you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, with a clear vision, which are the principles that ensure procedural, distributive, and restorative justice, and paying attention also to at-risk groups, also paying attention to planning elements to ensure a valid framework that will lead to a sustainable transition, as well as the looking and making sure that we have the correct policy levers that need to be pulled to realize the vision of the framework. So what are we talking about when we're talking about distributive, procedural, and restorative justice in this context? For distributive justice, we're talking about equipping South Africans with skills, assets, and opportunities to participate in this new economy. Because if we're saying we're transitioning into renewable energy and to use that, we need to ensure that we do not leave anyone behind, not only with regards to jobs, but also with ensuring that they also own the wealth and they own the means of production within this industry. And also ensuring that burdens and opportunities of the transition are fairly distributed, which is not what we've seen in the past in the country, and also promote local economic development. And with regards to procedural justice, we're talking of supporting workers and for workers to participate meaningfully in the transition process, which is what the PCC has been trying to do with stakeholder consultations all over the country and with different kinds of stakeholders, not only communities, but looking at academia, looking at practitioners, people in municipalities, and all types of stakeholders to actually contribute and be parts and own this process of having a just transition framework for the country. And when we talk about restorative justice in this context, we're talking about, considering historical injustices in the energy sector, such as employment laws that have governed the minerals and energy complex, and how that has perpetuated inequality levels. And also talking about coal and environmental impacts of the coal mining and Eskom power plants, particularly those living nearby these power plants. If you think of communities at Emalahleni in Mpumalanga and how they have been exposed to those kinds of harms, environmental harms, because of the way that production of energy has taken place over the years in those areas. And we're also talking about improving the environment through rehabilitation, especially in areas that have been overmined. And also to improve clean energy access and eliminating energy poverty, and ensuring that people are able to actually, not only produce energy, but also are able to afford the energy that is being produced in these areas. Now, when we talk about decent work, what we have done, just to give you, to bring in some empirical work that we have done in closing at Kwakuqa Township at Emalahleni, we conducted some interviews there with people that are working in the mining sector, in the coal mines, and some of them working in the Eskom power plants, and asking them exactly, what kind of jobs do they see replacing mining jobs? And these were people that were actually working there at the moment. And people were talking about sustainable jobs. We're talking about, jobs in agriculture, that jobs should be healthy, and maybe people should own their own business, and that jobs should be green. And some of the workers' perceptions, when we were asking them, is it fair to close these coal mines because, in the name of this transition? There was, 46% that said no. And their main concern was that jobs will be lost. And of course, one can understand that given the high unemployment rate in South Africa. And they said that we need to find alternative uses of coal. And 28% said that it would be fair, but there would need to be, a reskilling so that they can go into other industries. And then it would also be fair if there were other jobs. And those that said yes, they said yes because of health issues, because justice for nature, or for justice for nature and people, and because of the environment. Now, we also asked people if they would encourage their, they would encourage their children to work in the mines. And there was a big no, big resounding no, because they said that it was too dangerous. So when you talk about decent work and talking about, being a mine worker, a coal mine worker, people knew that even those people that were working there knew that it was dangerous, it was very risky. And they said that if they would, allow their children to work there, it would be only for office work, or if they were engineers, but not underground. And also if it would pay good money and if it was a good job. So lastly, we asked, South Africans working in these coal jobs to define what decent work would be for them, especially who are to transition into new industries. And they said it should be a job that has good benefits. It should have good or fair pay, be safe, something that they could also own, be based in a healthy and good environment. I think because of time, I will stop right here, but thank you very much for the opportunity. And I hope this was useful to the audience. Thank you.
Thank you so much for an informative presentation. I was saying it's really, really amazing. So one of the questions that I'm going to ask, the panelists can answer as well. What I found lacking and not missing for me, and maybe I just want to understand in this whole framework, how are you looking at dealing with women's participation? Because the conversation today is about how the past has impacted what's happening today. And we know that all that structural inequalities continue to impact women more than men. And we cannot talk about a just transition that does not spell out exactly how is it going to address women participation in the economy. I just wanted to understand along those lines of the distributive justice, the procedural and the restorative. What are we saying about women there? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for that question. Actually, it is my fault because I didn't include that. It is on my notes under restorative justice that, it's also important to include the formerly excluded groups and mainly the women. First, because women are managers of the households. So it means that whatever use of energy in the household, the women manage that. But also because they have been excluded in the ownership of product of energy production. So this is a good opportunity for them to actually be part of that, and whatever government, and there should be means to ensure that women are part of this new economy that we're moving towards. And that was part of the contributions that we also made to the PCC when this framework was being developed. So the gender considerations are definitely being looked at, and we're continuing on that note, on ensuring that women are part of that, and not only looking at, it's not enough to have women participate, but how meaningful is that, and what do you put in place to enable that? So what about childcare for the women that are now all of a sudden going to be participating in this new economy? And what about the skilling and reskilling? What part are they going to take in there? So all of that is being looked at, but not enough, of course.
Yes.
It's something that should be paid attention to constantly.
Okay, apparently our time is out, so there's no opportunity to ask our highly esteemed panelists. I'll just thank all of you for participation and for your contribution today. Can we give everyone a round of applause, please?
Do we leave?
Sorry, I didn't catch you.